Hi everyone, welcome to Medical Microbiology. Today we will continue chapter 12. This is going to be lecture 4. We will talk about the antifungal, antiparasitic, and antiviral drugs. So remember again, there are several groups of antimicrobial drugs. The first one is used only for bacteria, therefore it's called the antibacterial drugs. We already discussed this on the previous lecture. And then if it is used for fungi, it's called the antifungal drugs. If it is used for antiprotozoa, for the parasite protozoa, for example, it is going to be antiprotozoal drug. And if it is used for virus, then it's called the antiviral drugs. This is again one more is antihelminthics. If it is used for worms infection. Okay, just for information, number 3 and 5, they actually can be combined into what we call the antiparasitic drugs. Okay, so antiprotozoa and antihelminthics is considered as the antiparasitic drugs. We will also talk about this in today's lecture. First one, okay, it is actually the second one. Remember the first one we already discussed on the previous lecture, which is antibacterial drug. Now is the antifungal drugs, okay, the one that's used for fungal infection. There are several of them. The most common one is the amphotericin. Okay, this is used for fungal infection. Nystatin is also for fungal infection, especially for topical treatment. For the stubborn type of fungal infection, like athlete foot, for example, greaseylfulvin usually used for that treatment. Azoles, okay, this is for broad spectrum of fungal infection. Flucytosine, this is also for fungal infection, and echinocandins, also used for fungal infection. This is macrolide, a type of drugs that also used for treatment of fungal infection. And the next one will be the antiparasitics. Remember, these antiparasitics will be two types. The first one will be antiprotozoa. Okay, antiprotozoal drugs. And the second will be antihelminthics drugs, right, which is used for worm infection. Okay, so antimalarial, for example, so malaria is actually caused by protozoa. So this is going to be antiprotozoal drugs. So like quinone, chloroquine, this is the main drug that's usually used for malarial infection. And this drug is also used for prophylaxis. Okay, remember again the terminology, lecture 1, chapter 12. We also talk about the terminology for prophylaxis, which is drugs that also used for prevention against disease. So quinone, for example, in some area is also used for prevention. So, for example, if someone want to go for going to the area that a lot of malaria infection, then they can take this quinone as a prevention. Another antiprotozoan drug like metronidazole, this is also used. Remember this tetracycline, this is actually antibiotics that also actually can be used for uh, anti-protozoal protozoal infection. For the anti-helminthic drugs, so some of them, mebendazole, thiabendazole, niclosamide. So this is also used for worm infection. The next one is the one that used for viral infection. It's called the antiviral drugs. There are several types of them, like acyclovir. So if you see this acyclovir, mostly for herpes viruses. Ribavirin, usually for some hemorrhagic viral infection. AZT, this is usually used for HIV infection. Now, how this antiviral drugs actually used for? So what kind of targets? So the target mostly on the, related to the host cell. So this is, let's say this is the host cell. Okay, so there are some drugs that use for blocking the attachment and also the penetrations of the virus into the host cell. So remember again, there are 6 stages of viral cycles. Right? So start with the attachment, penetration, uncoating, synthesis, assembly, and the last one is release. So when you remember that each process can be a target for the antiviral drugs. So therefore, the first group, gonna be the one that block the attachment and penetration, for example. Like for example, fusion. This is used for blocking the attachment of HIV viruses. And amantadine, this is used for blocking the flu virus attachment. Right? The same thing also, Tamiflu is also used for blocking the penetrations of flu viruses. So this is a group of drugs that use to block the penetration and also attachment. Okay, Tamiflu and amantadine also used for blocking the release of the bacteria and the virus from the host cell. Now, the next group will be the one that inhibits the nucleic acid synthesis. Okay, remember bacteria carry nucleic acid, maybe DNA or RNA. Inside the host cell, this DNA or RNA virus will be able to duplicate or replicate. So there are some drugs that will be targeting this, targeting this process, whether duplication, replication, transcriptions of this nucleic acid. Okay, example is acyclovir. This is for herpes. So it will, block the synthesis of DNA of these herpes viruses. AZT, okay, this is also will block the synthesis of DNA and RNA of these HIV viruses. Remember, HIV is actually RNA viruses that are able to replicate into DNA, and then it will enter into the host cell to combine with the DNA, the host cell DNA. Okay? So AZT actually block this process. So there are some other drugs that also able to block the process of replication and transcription of these nucleic acids of some viruses. The last one is the one that inhibit the assembly and also release of the virus. So maybe the virus is still able to produce the protein like capsid, the spike and etc. But this drug, is used to block the combinations or the assembly of this capsid and the DNA. So basically, the virus that will be produced because of this blocking will be imperfect type of viruses, is not complete viruses. So it will not be able to causing infection to the other cell. Or maybe some drugs that will block the release. So the virus basically just stay in one cell, unable to exit the host cell to infect the other cell. So this is a group of antiviral drugs. Again, there are three groups. The first one usually used for blocking the attachment and the entry of the virus into the host cell. Okay, that's the first group. And the second group will be the drugs that use for blocking the synthesis of the viral cell. Right? And the last one will be the drug that can block the release and also the assembly of the virus inside the host cell. Okay. Again, this is example of some antiviral drug, especially the one that used for influenza, amantadine, rimantadine, Relenza, and Tamiflu. And again, I mentioned before that Tamiflu is not only used for curing the flu, but also can be used as prophylaxis or preventions for flu, especially H1N1 type of flu or influenza A type of infection. Another example is antiherpes drugs. So mostly is end with fir, like acyclovir, valacyclovir, famiciclovir, pheniciclovir. So all of them used for herpes, whether labial herpes or the genital herpes. Remember, labial herpes is caused by herpes simplex virus number 1. The genital herpes is caused by the herpes simplex virus number 2. So these are different type of anti-herpes drugs. For HIV, there are several type of drugs that is used. Like the most common one is AZT over here. This is the one that block the synthesis of DNA or DNA replications of RNA replications of these HIV viruses. There is another drugs or pharmaceuticals, medicine that also used for infectious disease to cure the infectious disease. This is called the interferon. So interferon is actually produced by cell, the infected cell. Okay, so let's say this is a cell, this is the host cell. Okay, so a human cell, for example, if there is a virus enter into the cell or maybe some infection into the cell, so this is considered as infected cell. So this cell is actually able to produce the interferon. So this interferon then will be used by the healthy cell. Let's say this is another cell. Okay, healthy cell. So when the healthy cell receives the interferon, this healthy cell will be able to produce the protein that will block the entrance of the virus, for example. So this interferon is actually used for making this block proteins, okay, the protein that able to block the infection. So this interferon actually can be harvested. Okay, so when it is harvested, then it can be used for disease to cure the disease. Okay, like for example, is used as a injection. So it injected into the healthy human in order to prevent them against some disease. Example is if a doctor or a nurse taking care of hepatitis B patient, sometimes they get the interferon injection in order to prevent them from getting the hepatitis B infection. Okay, this is just for examples. Some other also used for example, treatment again, hepatitis C, genital wart, Kaposi, sarcoma, and etc. So there are many functions of these interferons. I think that's all for lecture number 4. We will continue with lecture number 5, which is special discussion on drug resistance and also drug tests, looking for MIC, minimum inhibition concentration, and TI, which is therapeutic index. So I will see you on the next lecture. Goodbye.